Uh, well, I can speak for Akashic and I can speak for my experience with small publishers. My experience with small publishers is sometimes there's a conflict of interest that the publishing company also has a conflict of interest in terms of it being a business and on representing other writers and in terms of its being a vehicle for the publication perhaps of the people who work in that company. What impresses me about Akashic is whether the publisher Johnny Temple or the senior editor Ibrahim Ahmed or the other people who work in that company, whether or not they are interested in a writing career for themselves, they get no clue of it. They are strictly about the business of publishing. They are strictly about supporting, promoting, and distributing a writer's work, which means that I can call my editor at Akashic at 1 o'clock in the morning. I was about to say two, but and somehow he answers me in the email or answers me the next day, and the same thing on the weekend. What he is very focused on is, I'm not saying he isn't focused on his own work, I have no idea. But what he seems to be very focused on is positioning me, positioning my work. And I think that sometimes maybe small publishers, maybe Caribbean publishers don't get the idea that publishing is a business. It is a business like any other business. Well, the fact is that women are the readers of books, meaning that women are the ones who buy books. So one more time, I want to make a distinction between the art and the fiction, the art, the literary art, the work that's done in creating fiction, and the business. And as far as the business, publishers understand that the people who purchase books, the people who allow this business to thrive, the people who allow writers to be heard, turn out to be women readers. Now, I don't know how satisfactory that answer is. That's just one part of the answer in terms of marketing. The second part of the answer is that, and this may be a biased position, but I believe that all writing affects the reader primarily emotionally. And that is the entry. That's the port of entry. It's the port of entry for, I mean, a male will not, maybe not want to admit this, but the port of entry for any art is an emotional port. And I heard George Lamin talk very well about emotional intelligence. Last year, I heard him speak about that in Barbados, and he was right on target. And it seems to me that male writers think that that's too, that may be too weak. Oh, I think of poetry really. I mean, the books I have on my desk, like Lorna Goodison's poetry, I love. I did an anthology of Caribbean women writers, and a couple of years ago. And when I started it, I thought, I'm not going to have too many women writers, and I had over 60 submissions, and whittled it down to about 25. Um, a Caribbean woman writer that I like very much is Ramabai Espinay. I forgot the name of the book, the Something Bridge. God, it's escaping me. But Ramabai is a wonderful Caribbean woman writer. But for all the, I almost want to say B.S. Naipaul. But in terms of technique and in terms of sentence structure. But his vision is so warped for me that sometimes it's hard to get through that. Well, you have to start from the beginning, and you have to start with the emancipation of slavery. And you have to start with the fact that Africans were said, okay, you're free, and there was nothing. They didn't own land, they didn't have money, they didn't have anything. And then you have to start with the Indian population after their indentureship owning something. And that is a huge difference. So number one, it's the ownership of land. Number two, it's the psychology of immigration. There is something different when you leave your home to come to another place to make a better life. And it's totally different from when you're dragged from your home and you are, put into bondage. So those are two starting points. I will also add that the British had a heck of a lot to do with this, that they gave favor to the Indian population. Now, I think it's about time we end this fight. But if you look at, I certainly was in Trinidad and a high school person when, in secondary school in St. Joseph's when we got independence. And once the banks opened and started having tellers in the banks who were not white, the next group who came in were Indians. So there was a constant advantage in terms of the early thing about the 5 acres of land, the advantage of the British being more welcoming or bringing the Indian, giving the Indian population much more of an advantage. That is to my understanding. Although my father did tell me that in the civil service, the Indians had a very hard time penetrating the civil service. But they also came with a mindset, and that mindset was an entrepreneurship mindset. That mindset was a business mindset. When you leave your country, and you could make that same point about West Indians, Caribbean people who come to America. You come to New York, and you go down places in Brooklyn. Most of the businesses owned by black people, the people are from the Caribbean. When you look at, you don't have to scratch the surface too much to find that some big official, some big businessman, his parents were, or her parents were from our islands. So when you come to a place voluntarily with the intent of improving yourself, you come with a business mindset, which is good and bad. It means you're committed to making money, not necessarily committed to the development of the community, which is essential, you know. And so whereas West Indians in New York may be accused of not having that level of commitment to the community and be more focused on collecting my toys, one could probably make that accusation about the Indians in the Caribbean, and there's resentment on the other side. But I'm very hopeful. I think that these things take time.